the life of a Nicaraguan student would look like a little bit. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Annie.
Hey, hi guys. So I usually actually do this with the morning session, so I don't have slides to show you guys today, unfortunately. I'm just going to be telling you guys about daily school life in China. So I spent the last summer, not this past summer, but the summer before, working and teaching at a summer camp in Beijing, China. So to kind of give you a little idea, just in the summer alone, so China is actually, of all the countries in the world, Chinese students spend the most time in class on a daily basis as well as weekly out of any country. So on average, Chinese students spend about 9 hours in class. So from about 7 a.m. to usually around 4 p.m. or later. And I'll go into a little more detail about that later. But so I spent 2 months in China, and I worked at a private school. The private school is actually pretty common in China. So the camp I worked at, it was kind of an English language immersion summer camp. So it was a summer camp, but they learned a lot. It was 9 straight days for each section, and they had to start class at 7 a.m., and then they went until 5 p.m. And then after 5 p.m., they had afternoon sessions where they did extracurricular activities, where they practiced for a talent show. So even during the summer, they are in class sometimes 12 hours a day. So in China, they take their education very, very seriously. So as I said before, Chinese students attend class for about 5 or 6 days a week from around 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. or later. So this means 5 or 6 days, not just our usual. We usually go to school Monday to Friday. But in China, on Saturdays, many schools actually require morning classes in science and math. So it might not be the whole day, but a lot of times students have to go in the morning from like 7 to like 12 and take more classes. So they attend school a lot. So not only do they, a lot of Chinese students go to school from 7 to 4 p.m., a lot of students, especially the wealthier students, attend cram schools after school as well. So cram schools are held in the evening and on weekends. So it's kind of like tutoring, after school tutoring, like we have here. So I don't know, raise your hand if anybody's ever had any sort of tutoring, either like during lunch or after school, math tutoring, language tutoring. Okay, you guys might do it more in college when there's a lot of hard topics that you have to learn, but they are really rather intensive. So they go to school from 9 to 4, and then a lot of students will continue to go to school from 5 to 7 or 8 or even 9 p.m. So some students are in class for over 12 hours a day. So a lot of these cram schools kind of focus on building additional skills in math and science, as well as in Chinese and English, and a lot of one-on-one tutoring as well. So, and I don't know, a lot of people have stereotypical perceptions of Chinese students. A lot of them are really good at math and really good at science. And there is definitely a really big focus on math and science in Chinese schools, but they also focus on Chinese, English, history, literature, music, arts, and physical education. But the methodology between the ways in which they teach in China and in the US or in kind of Western education is slightly different. They focus a lot more on rote memorization. So in these kind of cram schools, they'll just sit at a desk and memorize all these different equations, a lot of different scientific terms. And so that's been something that China's been criticized, the Chinese education system has been criticized for, is that they don't really focus as much on kind of creative thinking, on arts, on those kind of, more thinking about it, having more flexibility in what you create, especially at the higher levels of Chinese education. It gets a little bit more intensive on math and science and memorizing these facts, because in particular, you have to take exams after middle school that will determine which high school you can get into. high schools in China are incredibly competitive and also, unfortunately, incredibly expensive. China has a rather complicated relationship issue with high schools in China. So technically, most public high schools aren't supposed to cost anything to students or their parents. But because there's been an increasingly amount of students who really want to go abroad and go to universities in the US or in the UK and Europe, it really depends on the school you go to and the grades you get. So they're really, really intensive in middle school or their version of middle school to get really good grades, get really good scores on their tests so they can get into these high schools. But even if they get into these high schools, usually they have to pay a certain amount of money, but under the table. So officially, the Chinese government does not encourage schools asking for money from parents, but parents, a lot of parents, it's become the norm that parents will have to give donations to the school for their students to attend the schools. And these donations range anywhere from $1,000, $5,000, or even more. So unfortunately, while they do have a public education system, there's a big disparity between students that have money, whose parents have money and can pay for their students to get into these more prestigious schools. And then the students who are living in the countryside who don't have the same resources to attend these cram schools. Because one thing I didn't mention, the cram schools cost money. So they're going to school from 7 to 4, but then their parents are paying more money for them to go to these cram schools so that they can get even more information, learn even more, so they can get good grades on their tests, so they can get into the high school, which their parents will also have to pay for, most likely. So the students, unfortunately, don't have these resources. They still go to school. They still can go up to school in high school, but there isn't a level of equity. They don't have the same, they aren't able to really access the same amount of resources and attend the same schools that these other students can. Because while the government says they don't allow schools to charge money, it's become kind of the norm. Because a lot of students, a lot of parents want their kids to go to schools abroad. So it's another big thing. They pay to have their students go to these schools, and then they also pay for, there's a lot of organizations in China that work to help you create the ideal application for American universities or British universities. So those are kind of the more extreme side of Chinese education. It's very competitive. So there's a kind of stereotype of Asian students being, or Chinese students in particular, being very, very smart. While some Chinese students are really smart, others aren't. I had a wide range of students in my classes. Everyone told me before I went over in kind of a stereotypical way that your students are going to be so well behaved. Your students are going to be so smart. And I had some great students that were really smart and really good at math and science, but I also had some students that loved drawing and really loved sports. And so at their core, Chinese students are really, really similar to American students, but because of the way their education system is constructed with the intensive rote memorization, with the 9+ hours of schooling they receive 5 to 6 days a week, they definitely have a little bit of a leg up for against a lot of Western universities purely in the way in which their education system is structured. But they're not fully extreme focus on math and science. They also do have a lot of after-school activities like sports and music lessons. And they're becoming a little bit more common and more extensively found in schools. After-school activities, not just cram schools, are becoming more common. I think in part because American schools want to see that on your resume, but also I had a lot of students that really loved soccer and really loved basketball and really loved to play these sports and wanted to do this. So there's been a push for students as well, especially kind of seeing in the media other schools, what other schools are like in Europe, in North America, South America, and so forth. So there's been kind of a student-led push for more after-school activities and more access to that as well. So there's more, there's also been more competition between schools as well. So they've developed intramural teams, this kind of competitive style in between schools. So the education system, the schools are still competitive between each other, but now it's sports as well. And then you also have students who really love drawing and art and music. So those are just definitely accessible as well. Kind of on the vein of the single stories that we've talked about before, Chinese students aren't just really good at math and science, they're just focused on math and science. Each student is an individual and very diverse, but the system and the way in which it's presented and constructed sometimes limits those expressions because it does have a focus on going to university, which in and of itself is competitive as well, and really hard to get into and expensive both in China and abroad. So that's another kind of complication that Chinese education system has been criticized for, but they're working on it because there has been kind of pushback from students and parents both in China and outside of China. Yeah. I don't know.
Awesome. Well, sorry guys, I'm going to have to dip out early. I actually have a few other things going on today, but it's been awesome working with you this semester. And if you have any questions about anything, Nicaragua, traveling, education, working with students with disabilities, or I spoke about Ghana earlier this semester. If you have any questions about those, feel free to, ask Ms. Annalyn to send us an email and I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, thanks again. Have a great semester and happy holidays.
Thanks.
So now do you guys want to take some questions or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so if you guys have any questions for Sylvia or Annie about China or Hungary or about related to school or anything else, come on up and ask.
And I also studied in London for a semester, so if anyone has any questions about the United Kingdom, I can answer those as well.
Yeah, if anyone has anything about Austria, I also studied abroad there, so just a whole host of countries for you, I guess. She's
many.
Mm-hmm. Any questions? Comments? Concerns?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kick you. Go ahead. Oh gosh, okay. So how is the dialect in Nicaragua? Oh my god, I cannot pronounce things today. What? Nicaragua. Different from dialects in other Central American countries.
Ooh.
So that would be for Anna, who had to leave, but we can email her that question to answer it. I actually used to be a Spanish teacher, and I can say that just in general for all the different Latin American countries, they all have a vocabulary that's a little bit different, and sometimes there's 5 different words for the same word in 5 different countries. But I will ask Anna, and I'll email you guys to see what some of the specific differences are for Nicaragua. Thanks.
Okay.
Good question, though.
We don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you guys again for a really nice semester and for listening to us today. I'll actually be doing the Zoom track again next semester, so I think we're working with you guys again. So you might be hearing more about me or about from me, I guess, next semester. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks guys. It's been great. One thing, just a theme that kind of goes throughout all of the places we talked about. A lot of the students tend to learn English or kind of learn about other countries and really are thinking about long-term traveling abroad or going other places. And we've all traveled abroad, and it's really kind of shaped who we are, really influenced our experiences. So that's something we really kind of want to encourage you guys to do. in the future when you go to college, even before, if you're presented an opportunity to go abroad, experience new culture, we really encourage you to take it. Or if anything, just try to, read more about the news, learn about what's out there. And remember, like, there's so many amazing different cultures out there, but there's at our core, human beings are all kind of similar. So you might think you have nothing in common with like a student from China, but there's something that you can always find a connection. So just kind of look for that.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very enriching experience.
And one final thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say that if you guys do end up going to a university like UNC, there's a lot of different opportunities for going abroad, and it's not always just studying abroad. Sometimes you can go for a summer. Sometimes you can go just for a fall break for 5 days if you want a little taste. There's a ton of funding opportunities where they actually pay for your trip to go. So if you want to go study, for example, in Asia, there's a program at UNC called Phillips Ambassadors where you can apply and they'll pay for you to go there. You can do internships and work abroad. You can volunteer. You can teach English like Annie did. Even if you don't go to university, there's opportunities to go abroad. For example, if you want to be an au pair and you want to go and take care of kids in another country for a year, you can do that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can go other than just a traditional study abroad for a semester. And there's a lot of funding opportunities. Again, sometimes UNC will pay students to go do research in another country, or they'll pay for them to design their own project, or pay for them to go do an internship. So where I work at the Center for Global Initiatives, there's a lot of opportunities. There's also a passport drive at UNC every year, and UNC gives out and pays for about 75 passports for students that have never had a passport. So if you don't have a passport and you're paying for college and that's tough, sometimes UNC will pay for you to get that first passport. So just encourage you to look for those opportunities when you are done with high school or even in high school, because there's a lot of different options out there.